You know what's annoying? When you're watching a video and all of a sudden it starts buffering. When you watch a video, the media player downloads a bunch of little tiny pieces known as segments and queues them up for playback. But if the media player runs out of queued up pieces, then you get that buffering icon that we know and love. This could happen for a few reasons, but one of the big ones is downloading from the origin or the server that hosts the content. If you get a lot of errors or the download speed is particularly slow, the media player is going to be playing back faster than it's downloading those tiny segments, resulting in buffering. Luckily, I know something that works pretty well for download speeds. If you use Momento Cache as your origin, you can get blazing fast download speeds for all of your segments, making sure that that media player is always ahead of the playback time. What we're going to be doing today is using AWS Elemental MediaLive, Amazon CloudFront, and Memento to build a lightning fast live streaming experience in just a few minutes. We'll start by creating a new cache in Momento. So here I have my cache list in my account. I'm going to click on the Create Cache button, and I'm just going to create a cache called Video. I'm going to use a region that's closest to me geographically. I live in Texas, so we're going to use US East 1. I'm going to go ahead and hit Create. Now what that's done is it's created this video cache that I have inside of my account. And you can see in here, I have the details for it. We're good to go. Now, next what we're going to do is we're actually going to create API keys to be able to access this and only this. Now, what we're going to do is we're actually going to do two things. We're going to create a API key that allows read and write permissions, and then we're going to create one that only allows read permissions. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to select video and read and write. I'm going to add permissions and say, okay, that looks good. Generate API key. Now this one is going to be used for the encoder for MediaLive. This is going to allow us to write directly to the cache via that AWS service. I'm going to go ahead and save this. And now I'm going to come back in here and create another token. This time I want read only. This is going to be for the video players to be able to fetch content out of this cache. So I'm going to add permission. You can see that we're doing just the video cache, read only, generate API key, and then we're going to save that off. I'm going to put it over into a notepad just for the time being. That's all we're going to end up doing in our Momento account. Now it's time to bounce over to AWS. We're here in my AWS account inside of the AWS Elemental MediaLive console. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a channel which is responsible for transcoding an input and then outputting it to a specific location. That specific location in this context being Momento Cache. But the first thing we're going to have to do is set up an input, the thing that we actually want to go ahead and stream. Now, for the sake of this demo, we're just going to be streaming a very basic and very iconic in the video world video, and we're just going to be streaming it as an MP4. Now this video is called Big Buck Bunny, and we're going to be using that in a publicly accessible S3 bucket. Don't repeat that out loud, and we will be doing a single input. There's the link to the publicly accessible video, and we're good to go. So we're going to hit create, and that's going to be our source for our channel. Now we're going to go into MediaLive and we're going to create a new channel. This channel we'll just call Big Buck. Might as well do Big Buck Bunny. And you can see I've been in here before, and I already have this existing role, this IAM role, MediaLive access role. This is something that AWS created for me the very first time I was in here, and I'm just going to go ahead and continue using it. If this is your first time in MediaLive, you can do create role from template, and it will generate this with least privileges, exactly what you need in order to use the service. So we have our role, we've named our channel. We're going to go and start with some of these higher level channel wide settings. So what we want for the channel class is a single pipeline. That means we just have one source or one destination. We don't have to specify a redundant location. So single pipeline is going to do that, and everything else we're actually just going to leave alone. It's a nice, easy setup. For input attachments, this is where we say, okay, this is what we're actually going to be using. For the media, we're going to use Big Buck Bunny, and that's, again, pulling out of our S3 bucket. We're going to say confirm. So that's exactly what we want for the content that we're going to be displaying. And we're actually not going to change anything else. This is good to go. We are not going to touch it. Okay, so we've configured the channel, we've configured the input. Now we're going to do basically the meat of it, the big part, setting up the transcoding in the output destination. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit add next to this output group, and we're going to say we want this to be an HLS or a live streaming type of output. So we'll hit confirm. And the first thing we're presented with is the URL. Now this is actually going to be a URL directly to the cache we just created inside of Memento. I'm going to go ahead and paste it here. We'll talk about it. So this is the URL to the region that we selected. And then with the endpoint here, we have /cache, the name of the cache we just created, and then playlist.m3u8. Now that's a standard name that we're going to be using for the HLS playlist. There's additional things that we need to add in here. Whenever you're publishing anything to Memento, you have to include TTL. So we're going to add query string parameters, TTL seconds, and we're going to say that this is valid for an hour. So we're going to say 3,600 seconds, and then one other piece we're going to add onto here. We're going to add one more query param, role equals origin. Now this is actually kind of a quirk inside of the MediaLive service. This is required for MediaLive, but not for Memento. So specifically in this use case, we need to add that to the end. Now, this is not a public endpoint, so we do have to create credentials in here. So we're going to say our username is token, and we're going to create a new parameter. And the value of this is going to be that read-write API key that we created at the very beginning of this video. So I have that copied to my clipboard. I'm going to paste it in here, and we're going to say create parameter, Memento token. Once that's created, we can select an existing parameter and choose Memento token. Now that's going to be providing our API key when it's going and posting to that URL that we configured. So a couple more things that we want to configure on this output group. For CDN settings, we want to use HLS, don't quote me on how to pronounce that, but this is actually, again, using another quirk about MediaLive. When you do a basic put, which is what you would think for CDN settings, it doesn't actually listen to the credentials inside of the service. So we're using this because when you use this output setting, it does use the credentials. Leave everything as is. We're not going to touch anything. And bump down here to manifest and segments. This is actually a very important piece that we're about to do. Most of this is already fine. It's already configured the way that we want it to be, except this one, segment length. Now, like I said before, the segment is this little piece of the video. So MediaLive is going to be chopping up this Big Buck Bunny video into 2-second segments and then uploading those 2-second segments into Memento. The smaller the segments, the faster generally it is going to be to download. Makes sense, right? So that's really all we're changing. We're just changing 2 from 10 to 2 and leaving the rest of it alone. The next thing we're going to be doing is changing the outputs. So we're going to be transcoding this video into different encodings and bit rates. And to do that, we have this HLS output here, and we're going to click on the settings link. Now in this settings link, we're just going to say this is the 240 resolution. So we have 240p 30 refers to the frame rate. We're going to leave that alone. We're going to leave everything else alone in here. Now the part that we actually have to configure to change is, we'll just say this is going to be 240, and then the height and the width. So the width of that is going to be 426 pixels. The height is going to be 240. Codec settings, we can leave alone. Now I'm going to go ahead and create 2 more outputs at different resolutions, and I'll just jump to that so you don't have to watch me do the same thing over and over. Welcome back. I have done the 480p and the 720p outputs. To add additional ones inside of an output group, you just hit that add output button, and all I did was add the size, the name modifier, and the dimensions again. So now that we've done that, everything is configured inside of MediaLive. So we've taken our Big Buck Bunny as an input, and then we have an output directly to Memento using our API key that we created at the very beginning and transcoding that video to 240, 480, and 720p. So I'm gonna hit create channel, and that's gonna get us going with MediaLive. That's going to set everything up for us, and it's really as simple as that. Now what we're gonna be doing is the read part. Now, because this is in our cache, we need to be able to have a way to get things out of the cache without an API key. And for obvious reasons, you don't want to be passing your API key around because that could lead to account takeover and all types of security issues. So what we're going to be doing is actually creating a CloudFront distribution inside of Amazon to front our Memento API and forward an auth header in that has that read-only access, so media players can pull down the segments automatically by themselves. Super fast, super easy. Let's get to it. So in order to do that, we're going to go from the MediaLive console into CloudFront. And inside of CloudFront, we're going to create a new distribution. So the origin is the base URL of the Memento HTTP API for the region that we want. We're using US East 1. We're going to scroll down here. We'll just call this Memento for the name. And for adding a custom header, yes, we definitely do want to do this. Now, this header is actually the entire reason why we're using CloudFront in the first place. So we're going to basically forward that authorization header to Memento. So I'm going to grab that read-only API key that we were using and put that in here as the value of that authorization header. We don't need to mess with the origin shield, but for this default behavior, we're going to change one thing. Most of this is fine. We're going to leave this alone, but down here, the policy, we actually want to disable this cache by default. So we're going to leave that off and continue on. We don't need to mess with the function. We're going to say we don't want WAF. And then we're going to go down here, basically leave everything else as is. And we're going to go and create the distribution. Now, one of the things that we have to do while that's going and deploying into the cloud and to all the points of presence, let's go ahead and create a behavior, because there's a couple different types of files that we're going to be using with our HLS live stream. So we have playlists, we have the master playlist, and then we have the variant playlists as well that are going to be specific to 240, 480, and 720p. But we also have the segments. And we want the behavior from CloudFront to be different because of the nature of those different types of files. Now, the segments, those are immutable. As soon as they're created, they're never going to change. And we can cache those as long as we want. But the playlist files, as the encoder keeps creating these segments, it has to update that manifest file to say, hey, this is the next segment. This is the live point in the stream. So we actually don't want to cache that. Now, we could technically cache it, but we're not going to, because that would have to be a really, really tight TTL. So to do that, let's look at this behaviors here and create a new one. So for all of our segments, those are going to end in a TS extension. We're going to say for the Memento API, let's go in here and set that, and we're going to leave everything else alone. Everything is good as is. Let's create that behavior. Now, what we want to do now is create that variant playlist behavior. So playlist underscore star dot m3u8. So any of those specific playlists for the Memento API, we don't want to cache. We don't want to cache these. So we're going to go back down here to the cache policy and change that to caching disabled. So that means let's just fetch that from the origin. Let's pull it straight out of Memento every time it's requested. So we're going to create that behavior, and that's it. That's really it. So now we just have a couple of things left, and that's trying it out and making sure that it works. Let's do that. To get this to play back, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to that channel that we created inside of MediaLive. Now here we are inside of our Big Buck Bunny channel. The only thing we need to do is start it. Okay, now the channel is started. Over here, you can see what it's actively rendering and transcoding, and then pushing subsequently into Momento Cache. Now, the next thing that we're going to be doing is fetching it. It's live right now. So now all we have to do is use that CloudFront distribution URL and give it the playlist that we've created right now, and it should just start working. Okay, so this is a little media player that I built that accepts a URL to an HLS playlist and then starts streaming it for you in the browser. Now, if I click on the squirrel, I can look at this playlist URL. What I'm going to do is I'm going to paste the URL directly to the playlist that's actively being generated by MediaLive. So this is the URL of our CloudFront distribution. We have /cache/video/playlist, and this is exactly what we were saying was the output of the MediaLive channel that we built. So I can do this, I can hit update, and immediately you start seeing that video being streamed in here to our browser, which is so cool. It's being transcoded over in MediaLive and then streamed directly out of Memento. You notice no lag. You see over here, I have the look ahead buffer, and it's staying consistently 10 to 12 seconds ahead of what the actual player is. You can see it's kind of jumping in bursts of 2 or 4 because we have segments of 2-second sizes. So that's it. That's really all there is to it to get Momento and MediaLive and CloudFront working to build your live streaming experience in minutes. Happy coding!